Shark is a game from the 1980s that I didn't even know existed until I saw this new version by Korea Board Games, and then I became curious. And after reading the rulebook and playing the game, I also noticed that the game has more than a passive resemblance with the classic game Acquire, in which also you will have a random system to determine how certain buildings representing companies are going to be placed on the board, but different from other games. It's not like I have that company, you have that company, rather we are going to invest in stock and we're gonna make and lose money based on that. So between Shark being an older game in itself and also harkening back to Acquire, a lot of game history here. But then of course you see that now we have a more modern digital based look. So this is a competitive game for 2 to 6 players, and it can be pretty mean and cutthroat for sure. The general idea is that, again, you'll be buying stock and that will give you money, which unfortunately in the game is represented by paper money, which everybody hates, and why wouldn't you? It's annoying, it doesn't feel right, it gets messy, it's getting messy quickly, it looks dirty, meh, paper money, boo. Just, again, maybe it's the idea of the nostalgia. Back in the day we had paper money. But that's the one thing about old gaming that no one is missing. Anyways, the production chose to give us paper money, and so that's what we got here. I must also say that if you play the game with 6 players, which I have, you're gonna have many transactions, and so you're gonna have to have a banker who's gonna be very busy taking money, giving money to people. And again, since a lot of those transactions are gonna happen all the time, chits, other kinds of tokens would have been easier and simpler. Since we're talking about the production, also here you have these cards here representing stock. They're perfectly fungible, so you can always trade five of these for one of these and vice versa. But they're just more 5 certificates than you need, and not enough 1 certificates that you need. We started repurposing game components, cubes, tokens from other games to make up for the missing ones. As for gameplay itself, the point is to make as much money as possible to be the wealthiest player by the end of the game. Players will alternate taking turns, and during your turn you will roll these 2 dice that will determine the mandatory placement of a building on the board, and there are these 4 types of buildings distinguished by color. Then you also have advanced rules and optional rules that will include black and or gray buildings that do different things, black being wild and gray being neutral. But the general idea is that each turn you will roll the dice, place a building, and each turn you can also trade stock, buy or sell, and you can do that before and or after rolling the dice and placing. So the rolling and placing is mandatory, the trading, buying, selling of stocks before or after is optional. Once you do those things, your turn is over and next player goes. As for the mandatory part, you're gonna roll these 2 dice. The green die tells you where you're gonna place the new building. 2 sides represent the shark area in the middle of the board, and the other ones have numbers for the 4 quadrants here. These will indicate the kind of building, so the company, and the companies are simply indicated by color. Only labeled by color, I don't know, I don't think it's particularly friendly for, of course, colorblind or color impaired players. I'm just surprised that by 2023, a professional maker of hobby games is still coding things only by color and not also by shape and pattern. So if I roll these dice, now I must place a green building somewhere in the shark area, just like that. The die for the type also has the black and the gray, which if you're not playing with those optional buildings, black and gray on this die simply mean any one that you want. And suppose I did that, then the next player will have to place a red in the 4 area. And actually this is interesting because it allows me to exemplify some very important rules here. Usually you're not allowed to place buildings of different colors or totally adjacent to each other. So that would not work at all. You could place them diagonally next to each other. And so maybe as the game progresses, this would be happening like so. These are all legal placements. And again, you can always place a lonely building because that doesn't bother anybody, like so. If you place a lonely building like so, you immediately collect $1,000, coins, monies, whatever you want to call it. You collect 1,000. But the general value of that company doesn't change. It changes if you add a building connected to other buildings of the same kind. Because the total value of a company is the total number of buildings that are chained in that company. So for example, right now the value of red is 3 because there are 3 red buildings next to each other. The value of green is 4. Incidentally, if there is this other one there, the value of green is still 4 because again, only chained buildings count. And so we do that. As I said, actually, when I say you place a lonely building, the value doesn't change. That only applies for the first. That only applies after the first. Meaning, if there are no buildings of a company on the board at all, and you place one, you collect 1,000, and yes, you set that to 1,000. After the first, then only chain buildings count. So, for example, that doesn't change the value. But now if I place a yellow there, all of a sudden the value of yellow goes to 3,000 because there are 3 yellow buildings chained. And so it goes up there. Now remember what we said, that usually you cannot place buildings or talking adjacent to buildings of other colors, so that would be illegal. There is a super important exception. If by adding a building, I am creating or expanding a chain which is larger than an adjacent chain from another company, then I'm allowed to do it, and not just that, I destroy the entire other company. So that would be called a hostile takeover. So right now, well, green is pretty scary, and it just destroyed this one. Right now, that would be interesting because here they're both a 5, so whoever places between green and yellow one there, because they're both allowed to do it, would be able to do a hostile takeover because there would be 5 versus 6. So that would be a tricky situation. As buildings are added to chains or removed from chains, the value changes. So right now, we just cleaned the red company entirely and the value drops to that. As opposed to here, both green and yellow are at 5,000. Remember that we are stockholders, like it's not like I'm green and you are red. Rather, you're gonna have a combination of stock from different companies. Now, when the price goes up or down, you're gonna make or lose money. And you make, of course, the difference that was earned, or you lose the difference that was lost, times the amount of shares that you have. For example, the red company was 3,000, and he went down to 0, so I lost 3,000, then I lose $3,000 per share. It is the situation. And if green goes there and now is increasing from 5 to 6, it gained 1,000, I'm gonna make 5,000. So when this thing moves, when the value marker moves up or down, you make or lose the difference, the number of spots that it was moved, of course, for each share that you have. And so it's entirely possible that, well, you lose, you are not able to pay for all that you owe, in which case you are forced to sell your stock, but at half of the price. So that's pretty annoying. Remember, so all this happens, the placement, the possibly hostile takeover, the payouts, or the paying for damages, so to speak, all happens in the mandatory phase. connected to place a new building, but then we have the optional phase in which you can simply sell or buy what you have, and you sell or buy at the current value. So for example, booyah, I could sell, I could buy more red at 1,000 or sell mine. Of course, the deal is that maybe I buy it now because I think it's gonna get big. The value goes up, and now I drop these ones before I think the hostile takeover will destroy them. The general idea is still very simple. You're trying to buy low and sell high, and that's how it works. So, turn after turn, a new company is placed from time to time. A catastrophic hostile takeover will take place. Players will make or lose money. The game continues until either the value of a company goes to the top of the track, 15,000, or all buildings of a company have been placed on the board and you cannot place any more. Incidentally, when buildings are removed in a hostile takeover, they don't go back to the supply, they're removed from the game. Another way the game can end if all stock have been acquired by the players. Whichever of these three conditions applies, the game is over, and at the point the wealthiest player wins the game. Shark is a fun game. I really enjoyed it. Not for everybody, not for every situation, because it is mean. And maybe the image, the title, should already clue you to that. But in case you thought, oh, must be ironic. Oh no, you're gonna be a shark and you're gonna bite big chunks of your friends and backstab them with your little fins holding knives. I don't know how the anatomy works, but it is definitely a game that encourages a strong degree of confrontation. So, for example, it wouldn't work with my family, but it works very well with my friends. Game night, we do have some of us who enjoy that, including myself. Not every day, but sometimes I do. What is also interesting, though, is that it's not just straight, cold Eurogame meanness. I'm not just gonna do the math for this or that, although the mathematical element is there definitely. But there is a strong element of diplomacy and manipulation because, well, you're gonna see who has certain stocks and who has who's invested in certain things, and so you form coalitions, but you're definitely not gonna be married to those. Matter of fact, as things start going bad or you think they will, you're gonna dump all of your interest in a company when it pays very well, and you're gonna maybe shift alliances. So I found that most of the time to me was spent negotiating and trying to manipulate and persuade my friends and making coalitions that I had no intention of truly, investing in, like of backing up any further than when I wanted and when I needed. So to me that was interesting because around this like pretty abstract, even abstract looking game, I found that it was mainly a game of diplomacy and negotiation and a lot of backstabbing. Is there a random element? Yes, but it is the kind of random element which to me is paradoxically almost like erases itself from the picture. Meaning, with so much dice rolling, you're going to have a lot of random checks, each of which is going to only impact the situation minimally, until it gets to the breaking point in which, well, there are these two companies. One is 5 and one is 5. And like in the example I showed you, and one of them may destroy the other. But that doesn't happen in a second. Because if they have a 5 and 5, and probably other results were rolled also, and maybe those same company but somewhere else, that means there were maybe like 20, 30 rolls. And so we went around the table a couple of times and we saw those companies grow gradually. We realized at some point that they may get in each other's way. One may try to destroy the other. So first, the randomness is not like, well, I roll well and you roll poorly. Because that may impact anybody depending on what you have invested in. So there is randomness, but its randomness that simply adds interesting elements to the story. Again, it shouldn't happen like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that the company that I've invested on at 4 buildings is next to another one that can take it over, because that must have at least 4 plus 1 is 5. It shouldn't happen. If you realize at that point, again, probably don't need to blame the dice. So I like that. I like the unpredictability that came from the random element of the dice, that, however, did not erase the value of strategy and negotiation. If anything, it elevated it by giving it just another thing that you have to take into account. And again, it's mean. It's mean. And yes, at some point there will be that die roll that may cause a big change, but again, it shouldn't come unannounced. So for a game that from time to time, with the right friends that you like and love enough, that you can be a little bit of a jerk with, and everybody knows is in good spirit. Well, this is a game that I enjoyed quite a bit, and my group enjoyed it quite a bit, and they already asked me when we're gonna play next. So that's a good sign. That's a good sign. I think this is a game that is gonna see some time on the table in the near future.